Before the internet came into our lives, the world moved at a very different pace. It was the 1980s, a time of landline telephones, handwritten letters, cassette tapes, and printed newspapers. If you wanted to talk to a friend in another country, you had to write a letter, put it in an envelope, stick a stamp on it, and drop it into a mailbox. Then you would wait, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, for the reply to come back. If you wanted to learn something, you opened an encyclopedia or went to the library. Inside the quiet halls of libraries, shelves were filled with thick books. People searched for knowledge by flipping through pages, not by typing words into a search bar. If you wanted to buy something, you had to go to a store. There were no websites, no online shopping carts, no one-click orders. You couldn't order a toy or a book from your bed. You had to go outside, walk or drive to the shop, look around, pay with cash, and bring it home. Life was simple, but it was also slow. People in the 1980s dreamed of connection, but it was a different kind. Airplanes connected cities, television connected people to the news, and radio connected voices to homes. But there was no single place where everyone in the world could share ideas instantly. Telephones worked through cables under the ground and across oceans. These cables carried voices as electric signals from one place to another. But there were limits. You couldn't send a photo through the phone. You couldn't send a song or a book. It was only sound, your voice and the voice on the other end. Computers already existed, but they were mostly used for work, not for fun or chatting. They were big, heavy machines that made loud noises. Many of them had black screens with green text and no pictures. Only scientists, government offices, or big companies had access to them. For an average family, a computer sounded like something from science fiction. People imagined blinking lights and mysterious codes. Few knew that these boxes would one day fit into every home, and later, every pocket. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, something began to change quietly. Small companies, names like Apple, IBM, and Microsoft, started to make computers that ordinary people could buy. The Apple II, the IBM PC, and later the Commodore 64 became famous. These computers could do simple things like typing documents, playing games, or solving math problems. They had floppy disks instead of USB drives. The disks were large, soft squares that could store a tiny amount of data compared to today's devices. But still, there was one thing missing: a way to connect computers to each other. People could type, draw, and play, but only on their own machine. There was no way to send a message to another person's computer. Each computer was like a small island, alone in a wide sea of information. And somewhere, quietly, scientists were working to build bridges between those islands. In the late 1960s, even before the 1980s, a few smart people in the United States began experimenting with ways to connect computers over long distances. They worked for universities and a research project called ARPANET, funded by the U.S. Department of Defense. In 1969, 4 computers in California and Utah were connected for the first time. They could send simple messages using lines of code that looked confusing to most people. But this small step was the birth of something big, the idea that computers could talk to each other. As the years passed, more universities and laboratories joined in. They sent data through phone lines using a new idea called packet switching, cutting information into small pieces, sending it through cables, and reassembling it at the other end. At the time, it was all experiments done by scientists in quiet rooms filled with machines, wires, and blinking lights. But those blinking lights were the first sparks of what we now call the Internet. By the early 1980s, computer technology was growing fast. Businesses started using them for accounting, banks used them for records, and schools began teaching students how to type and use software. Still, there was no internet for the public. People used modems, small devices that made strange buzzing sounds as they connected one computer to another through telephone lines. If you wanted to share a file, you had to dial another person's computer number, and both sides had to wait for the modem to connect. It was slow, often failed, and blocked the phone line while it worked. In some cities, early computer enthusiasts created bulletin board systems, or BBS for short. These were small, local servers where people could post messages or exchange files. You could think of them as tiny, private versions of the internet. Even then, people were fascinated. They could talk to strangers far away, they could play games and share stories. It was the beginning of a new way to connect, but the world hadn't seen anything yet. Scientists dreamed of something bigger, a network that connected not just a few computers, but all computers. In the early 1980s, two researchers, Vinton Cerf and Robert Kahn, developed something called the TCP/IP protocol. It sounds complicated, but it simply means a common language that computers could use to communicate. This invention was like giving every computer a way to understand each other, no matter who built it or where it was. By January 1, 1983, the ARPANET officially switched to TCP/IP, a moment many historians now call the birth of the Internet. Still, it wasn't something you could use at home yet. There were no websites, no browsers, no pictures or videos. It was just text, mostly for scientists, engineers, and students. But the foundation was set. A quiet revolution had begun, and soon it would escape from laboratories and change the lives of ordinary people everywhere. Before the internet, knowledge was something you had to find with effort. People collected books, watched the evening news, or read newspapers delivered each morning. Information moved slowly, sometimes too slowly. If a big event happened in one country, it might take hours or days before people in another part of the world heard about it. News traveled through wires, satellite signals, or printed pages. But there was no instant sharing. There was no way for an ordinary person in one country to speak directly to another in real time. If you wanted to research something, say the history of the moon or how to bake bread, you would go to the library, find the right shelf, open a book, and read. It could take hours just to find one answer. The idea that one day anyone could type a question and instantly get an answer from anywhere in the world seemed like pure fantasy. In homes, entertainment came from television, radio, and books. Kids played outside more often, riding bikes, climbing trees, and playing sports. If you wanted to visit a friend, you rang their doorbell. If you wanted to take photos, you used a film camera. After taking pictures, you had to wait for the film to be developed, sometimes for days, before you could see how they turned out. Music came from cassette tapes or vinyl records. You had to rewind or flip sides to listen again. If you wanted to share your favorite song with a friend, you recorded it onto another tape, a mixtape. There were no emojis, no memes, no instant messages, and yet people were happy. Life had a slower rhythm. Conversations were longer. Letters were personal. Time moved gently. Businesses in the 1980s used fax machines to send documents. Banks used paper records and printed checks. If someone wanted to transfer money, they had to go to the bank, fill out forms, and wait for approval. International transactions could take days or even weeks. Commerce was local. You bought things from nearby shops, and stores competed with each other on the same street, not across the world. The idea that one day people would buy and sell across continents in seconds was unimaginable. And yet, in small computer rooms and university labs, the tools to make that possible were quietly being built. While scientists worked on connecting computers, Europe was also changing in another way. The continent was growing closer politically and economically. After decades of wars and divisions, many European countries wanted peace and unity. They began to trade more, travel more, and work together under something called the European Economic Community, or EEC. But there was still a problem. Every country had its own money, its own currency. France had francs, Germany had marks, Italy had lire, and Spain had pesetas. Every time someone crossed a border, they had to exchange money, pay extra fees, and deal with different prices. Travelers carried thick wallets full of notes and coins. Businesses struggled with exchange rates that changed every day. Europe wanted something simpler, one common currency to make trade and travel easier. But just like the internet, that dream was still years away. The 1980s became a decade of quiet invention and preparation. Scientists improved computer networks. Engineers made machines smaller and faster. Europe worked on economic agreements and trade rules. The world didn't realize it yet, but two revolutions were forming side by side, one digital, one economic. By the end of the 1980s, computers were becoming more common in homes. Children played simple games, parents typed letters, and schools taught basic computer skills. At the same time, European leaders were meeting to discuss how to make their economies more connected, how to build trust and unity among nations that had once fought wars against each other. The stage was set. The 1990s would soon arrive, and with them, two transformations that would forever change how humanity communicates and how it trades. As the 1990s began, something invisible started to spread quietly through wires, cables, and phone lines, something that would soon change every part of human life. It was called the Internet. At first, very few people understood what it was or what it could do. Most still saw computers as office tools, big boxes used for typing letters or storing records. But deep inside universities, research centers, and small computer clubs, the Internet was slowly being born into everyday life. It didn't happen all at once. It happened through a series of small but powerful inventions, new ways of connecting, sharing, and understanding the world. This was the decade when the world took its first step into the digital age. Before the 1990s, the Internet was something only scientists and government workers could use. It was mostly text-based, just lines of code, no pictures, no videos. You had to know special commands to even move around it. But something magical happened in 1991. A British computer scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, introduced an idea that changed everything: the World Wide Web. He created the first website, the first browser, and the first web server. His idea was simple yet revolutionary: a way to link documents together using hyperlinks. Instead of typing long commands or numbers, people could just click on a word or a picture and jump to another page instantly. It was like connecting every book, every idea, and every piece of information in the world with invisible threads. Tim Berners-Lee didn't keep his invention for himself. He made it free for everyone, believing that information should be open and shared. That one decision allowed the Internet to grow faster than anyone could have imagined. The very first website was about, well, the web itself. It explained what the Internet was and how people could create their own web pages. Soon others followed. Universities, news stations, and technology lovers began making their own pages. They looked simple: white backgrounds, black text, blue links. There were no fancy colors or videos, but for the first time, information was alive, connected, and clickable. By 1993, the Internet had started to leave laboratories and enter homes. That same year, two American students, Mark Andreessen and Eric Bina, created Mosaic, the first popular web browser that could show images along with text. For millions of people, that was their first real window into the Internet, a way to explore and see pictures and stories from around the world right on their screen. Connecting to the Internet in the 1990s was an experience on its own. You needed a modem, a device that connected your computer to a telephone line. When you dialed in, the modem made a series of strange robotic noises: high beeps, static, and hisses. It was the sound of your computer calling another computer somewhere far away. After a few seconds, if everything worked, you were connected. The screen showed a message, "Connected at 28.8 kbps." That number meant how fast your connection was. though by today's standards, it was very slow. Loading a single picture could take minutes. Watching a video was nearly impossible. But back then, just seeing text and images from around the world felt like magic. The first things people used the internet for were simple: sending messages, reading news, and joining online discussions. Email became the new way to write letters. Instead of waiting days or weeks, people could send messages across the world in seconds. The idea felt almost unreal. Then came chat rooms and forums, places where people could talk to strangers about shared interests: music, movies, science, or even just daily life. For the first time in history, people who had never met, who lived in different countries and spoke different languages, could communicate instantly. It was the beginning of global communication. Students discovered that they no longer needed to visit libraries every time they needed information. Universities started putting their lectures and articles online. Newspapers and magazines created websites where anyone could read the latest stories. In classrooms, teachers began showing students how to browse the web. Typing www before a name became a new habit. The world was beginning to understand that the internet wasn't just a tool, it was a door to endless knowledge. For scientists, it was a dream come true. For teachers, it was a revolution. For businesses, it was a goldmine waiting to be explored. And for young people, it was an adventure. By the mid-1990s, people realized they could not only share information online, but also sell things. Small online stores began to appear. One of the first was Amazon, founded by Jeff Bezos in 1994. At first, it sold only books, but it offered something no bookstore could: a nearly unlimited selection, all available from your home. That same year, eBay was created, an online marketplace where anyone could auction and sell things. It turned ordinary people into small business owners overnight. These companies were planting the seeds of what would become e-commerce, or online shopping, something that would one day change how the world buys and sells everything. While the internet connected pages, it also connected people. Email became one of the internet's greatest gifts. You could write to your cousin, your teacher, or your boss, and they could reply instantly. Messages no longer needed envelopes, stamps, or waiting. They traveled at the speed of light. Soon people wanted more than just email. They wanted real-time conversations. This led to the rise of programs like ICQ, AOL Instant Messenger, and Yahoo Chat. People spent hours talking with friends, sometimes with strangers, forming communities that lived only inside computer screens. Many users still remember the excitement of hearing a computer say, "You've got mail." It meant someone, somewhere, was thinking of you. The internet didn't just change work and communication, it also changed play. In the early 1990s, simple online games began to appear. They were text-based at first, where players typed commands like "go north" or "pick up sword." But soon, graphics and multiplayer games arrived. Games like Doom, Quake, and Ultima Online let people play together from different countries. For the first time, gamers didn't need to be in the same room. They could team up or compete with people thousands of miles away. Friendships and rivalries began to form online. The digital world was becoming social long before social media existed. In the 1990s, traditional newspapers realized something big was happening. People were starting to read news on screens instead of paper. Major outlets like the New York Times and BBC launched their first websites. Suddenly, news could be updated every minute instead of every morning. Readers could comment, share, and discuss stories, something impossible in printed papers. Information was becoming alive, constantly changing, constantly growing. It was both exciting and challenging. Some people worried that the internet would replace newspapers and books. Others believed it would simply make them more powerful. In truth, it did both. By the late 1990s, the internet was no longer a thing for experts. It was becoming a normal part of daily life. Families began buying computers just to go online. Internet cafes opened in cities where people could pay for an hour of connection. Companies began putting their email addresses on business cards. A new vocabulary entered the world. Log in, surf the web, download, click here. For children, it was the start of a new world, one where they could learn, play, and explore without leaving home. For adults, it was both exciting and confusing. Many wondered if this new digital world would make life easier or more complicated. The early internet was not perfect. It was slow, expensive, and full of limitations. You could not use the telephone while connected to the internet. The same phone line carried both signals. Web pages took a long time to load, and sometimes connections would drop suddenly. There were also new dangers: computer viruses, scams, and misinformation. Since anyone could publish anything online, it became harder to tell what was true. Parents worried about what their children might see. Governments worried about secrets being shared. Teachers worried that students might copy homework from the web. The world was learning in real time how to live in this new digital society. By the mid to late 1990s, the internet had spread far beyond the United States and Europe. Countries in Asia, Africa, and South America began connecting too. In Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, technology companies started building faster networks. In India, schools and offices began using email for the first time. In Africa, radio stations and universities became gateways to the internet for thousands of people. What had started as a small experiment between a few computers was now becoming a worldwide web, a web that connected people, cultures, and ideas like never before. Even governments began to see the power of the internet. They used it to share information, make announcements, and even collect taxes. In 1996, the White House launched its first official website. Other countries followed. The internet became not only a space for businesses and individuals, but also a tool for nations. This was the dawn of digital governance, where communication between people and their leaders could happen with a few clicks. By the late 1990s, excitement around the internet turned into a rush, a gold rush. New online companies appeared every day, many ending with .com. Investors poured money into startups that promised to change the world. Some did, many didn't. People believed that the internet would make everyone rich. Companies like Yahoo, Google, Amazon, and eBay became famous names, but thousands of others disappeared after a few months. Still, even with failures, one thing was certain. The world had entered a new era, one powered by information, connection, and creativity. By the end of the 1990s, the internet had connected millions of people around the world. Families could talk through email. Students could research instantly. Businesses could sell globally. A child in one country could learn from a teacher in another. A small store could reach a customer thousands of miles away. A scientist could share a discovery instantly with the whole planet. The world was becoming smaller, faster, and more connected. A global village, as some called it. But while the internet was changing how people communicated and learned, another transformation was quietly happening in Europe, one that would soon change how people traded and spent. It was the birth of something new, the euro. By the time the world stepped into the late 1990s, the internet was no longer just a strange experiment. It had become a living, breathing part of everyday life, shaping how people talked, learned, worked, and dreamed. It was like a giant invisible web stretching across the planet, linking millions of people who had never met before. The world had entered the digital age, and nothing would ever be the same again. Before the internet, long-distance communication was slow and limited. People wrote letters, made phone calls, or sent faxes. But now, things had changed. Email became a normal part of daily life. You could wake up, turn on your computer, and find messages from family, friends, or coworkers waiting for you. It didn't matter if they lived in the next city or on the other side of the world, messages arrived in seconds. Then came instant messaging, chat programs where people could talk live, line by line. Programs like MSN Messenger, ICQ, and Yahoo Chat let millions of people connect instantly. A teenager in Pakistan could chat with a pen pal in Canada. A businessman in Germany could discuss a deal with someone in Japan without a single phone call. It was the first time in history that humans could communicate freely, directly, and almost instantly, across borders, across oceans, across time zones. Something unexpected began to happen online. People started forming communities. There were message boards for sports fans, chat rooms for travelers, forums for gamers, and groups for every hobby imaginable, from cooking to astronomy. People who had never met in real life became friends. They shared advice, jokes, and even their struggles. For some, these digital communities became places of comfort and belonging. In a world where you might feel alone in your small town, you could now find thousands of people who shared your exact interests. It was the start of online friendship, something that felt both new and magical. And these connections were real. People met online, formed bands, started businesses, and even fell in love. The internet had turned from a tool into a world of its own, a social space where millions gathered every day. Before the internet, learning was limited by where you lived and what books you had. But now, anyone with a computer and a connection could explore the entire world of knowledge. Encyclopedias like Britannica went online. Universities began to share lectures and research papers. Students could find answers, read articles, and watch educational videos right from home. Schools and teachers started using the internet in classrooms. They encouraged students to look it up online instead of searching dusty shelves. Children born in the 1990s were the first generation to grow up with this kind of access. They became known as digital natives. The internet had opened the gates to the world's largest classroom, one that never closed. Around the same time, shopping began to change too. People discovered they could buy things without leaving their homes. At first, it seemed strange. Many worried, how can I buy something I can't see or touch, or is it safe to use my credit card online? But slowly, trust grew. Amazon expanded beyond books, selling electronics, clothes, and everything else. eBay allowed anyone to sell old toys, collectibles, or furniture to people across the world. Soon, thousands of small businesses began selling online, and new words entered everyday language. Add to cart, checkout, tracking number. This was the start of e-commerce, and it would completely reshape how the global economy worked. Now they could read news anytime, from anywhere. Websites updated stories by the minute. Breaking news appeared online first, even before it reached TV. People could read, comment, and even share their opinions with the world. Music changed too. Instead of buying CDs, people began downloading songs from the internet. Websites like Napster appeared, allowing users to share and swap music files. For artists in the music industry, this was both exciting and frightening. Songs spread faster than ever, but often for free, without permission. This was the beginning of a long struggle between the digital world and traditional industries, one that continues even today. For gamers, the 1990s were like stepping into a new universe. Games were no longer limited to single players sitting at home. The internet allowed people to play together, no matter where they were. Games like StarCraft, Counter-Strike, and EverQuest introduced massive online worlds. Players could compete, cooperate, and chat in real time. They formed clans and guilds, creating virtual friendships that sometimes lasted for years. For many young people, online gaming wasn't just entertainment. It was a community, a digital home. And it was a preview of what the internet would later become, a blend of work, play, and connection. As the internet spread, businesses began to realize that it wasn't just for fun or communication, it was essential for survival. Companies launched websites to advertise their products. Email replaced faxes. Online databases replaced paper files. Even small businesses could now reach customers across the world. Banks went digital, allowing people to check balances, transfer money, and pay bills online, something that felt revolutionary at the time. Travel agencies moved online too. Instead of visiting an office, people could search for flights, compare prices, and book vacations from their computers. The internet had changed not only how people talked, but how they worked, spent, and traveled. The internet made the world feel smaller, not physically, but emotionally and culturally. You could read about someone's life in another country, see their photos, or hear their voice in real time. Barriers of distance and time began to fade. Businesses could collaborate across continents. Families separated by migration could stay in touch. Students could attend virtual classrooms hosted halfway across the world. People began to see humanity as one connected family, different but linked by a shared network of knowledge and experience. The term global village became popular, a world where everyone, everywhere, could talk, learn, and grow together. But as the internet grew, so did its problems. Privacy became a concern. When people shared personal information online, it could sometimes fall into the wrong hands. Computer viruses began to spread through email attachments. Hackers discovered ways to steal data or break into systems. New laws had to be written to protect people's digital lives. Governments started to learn how to manage the new cyber world. Misinformation or fake news also became a problem. Since anyone could publish anything, false information sometimes spread faster than the truth. People had to learn to question what they saw online, to think critically, and to check sources. The internet was powerful, but it also needed responsibility. Toward the end of the 1990s, mobile phones began to grow in popularity. At first, they were big, heavy, and only used for calling. But soon, companies started experimenting with ways to connect them to the internet. Simple services like text messages and email on phones began to appear. People realized that one day they might be able to carry the internet in their pockets, though at the time it still sounded like science fiction. It wouldn't be long before that dream became reality in the 2000s, when smartphones arrived. But even in the late 1990s, the idea of being always connected had already begun. Governments saw how important the internet was becoming for education. In the United States, programs like Net Day began in the mid-1990s, wiring schools for internet access. Other countries followed, ensuring students could learn computer skills. Children were taught how to use search engines, send emails, and create documents online. In some schools, teachers even used the web to share homework and grades. At home, more families saved money to buy computers, treating them as essential tools like televisions or refrigerators. Computer literacy became a new kind of skill, as important as reading or writing. The internet gave rise to a digital economy, a new kind of marketplace built on information and connection. People began to work online, offering services like design, writing, and programming. Digital payments appeared. Services like PayPal made it easy to send and receive money electronically. Stock markets also moved online. Investors could trade shares in real time without calling brokers. The whole idea of work began to shift. You didn't need to be in an office anymore. You just needed an internet connection. This idea, remote work, would grow even more powerful in the decades to come. By the late 1990s, the internet wasn't just technology. It had become a culture. People spoke a new language: LOL, BRB, AFK,
and smiley face, the first digital expressions of emotion. Online jokes, images, and videos, known later as memes, began to spread. Websites like GeoCities and MySpace let people create their own pages with colorful backgrounds, photos, and personal stories. The internet became a mirror of human life, full of creativity, humor, and imagination. It was messy and chaotic, but also beautiful, a reflection of everything humanity could be when connected. As the 1990s came to a close, the internet had reached more than 200 million users. What began as a network between scientists had become the most powerful tool ever created by humans. It had changed communication, education, entertainment, and business. It had brought people closer, even if they had never met. The 20th century had seen inventions like electricity, the car, the airplane, and the telephone. But now, something new had arrived, something that connected them all. The internet had become the heartbeat of the modern world. And while it was transforming how the world connected, Europe was preparing for another kind of connection, one made not of wires and data, but of money and trust. The world was about to witness another revolution, the birth of a single European currency, the euro.
While the internet was quietly connecting people through screens and cables in the 1990s, another kind of connection was forming, one that had nothing to do with computers or wires. This was a connection of nations, of economies, and of people who shared the same continent, but not the same money. This is the story of how Europe, a land once divided by wars, languages, and currencies, began to unite under one shared dream, a single European currency called the euro. To understand why the euro was created, we need to go back a few decades, to the years after World War II. Europe had been through 2 terrible wars in less than 30 years. Millions of lives were lost, cities were destroyed, and economies were broken. When the war finally ended in 1945, European leaders realized something important. If they wanted lasting peace, they needed to work together, not against each other. So, countries that had once been enemies, like France and Germany, began to cooperate. They started small, focusing on trade and rebuilding. In 1951, they formed the European Coal and Steel Community to share resources that had once fueled wars. It was the first real step toward unity. Over the next decades, more countries joined, forming what became known as the European Economic Community, or EEC. The goal was simple: to make Europe stronger and more peaceful through economic cooperation. By the 1980s, Europe had changed. Trade between countries was growing fast. People could travel more easily, companies were doing business across borders, and a shared European identity was slowly forming. But there was still a big problem: money. Each country had its own currency. France used the franc. Germany used the mark. Italy used the lira. Spain used the peseta. The Netherlands used the guilder. Belgium used the Belgian franc. Whenever a person or business wanted to trade across borders, they had to exchange money. And each exchange had a fee, a small percentage taken by banks or money changers. Even worse, the value of each currency kept changing. One week, a German product might be cheap for a French buyer. The next week, because of exchange rate changes, it could become expensive again. This made trade confusing, risky, and sometimes unfair. Europe wanted a single market, where goods, people, and money could move freely. But that dream was impossible as long as each country used a different currency. In the 1980s, a new idea began to take shape. What if all European countries used the same money? It sounded simple, but it was one of the most ambitious economic projects in history. The idea of a single European currency was first discussed seriously in 1988 when European leaders met in Hanover, Germany. They asked a Frenchman named Jacques Delors, who was then the president of the European Commission, to study how it could work. He and his team created a detailed plan called the Delors Report. It said that Europe would need a shared economic policy. a single central bank, and one stable currency. It was a bold vision, a united Europe, not just in politics, but in economics. This report became the foundation of what would later be called the Economic and Monetary Union, or EMU. In 1992, European leaders gathered in a small Dutch city called Maastricht. There, they signed one of the most important agreements in modern European history, the Maastricht Treaty. This treaty created a new organization, the European Union, and set the rules for adopting a single currency. Countries that wanted to join the euro would need to meet strict economic conditions, keep inflation, price increases low, keep government debt under control, maintain stable exchange rates, keep interest rates close to the average of other member countries. These were known as the Maastricht criteria. The idea was simple. Only healthy economies could join so that the new currency would remain strong and stable. The treaty also announced a goal to introduce the new currency before the end of the decade. It represented more than economics. It represented peace, cooperation, and identity. For centuries, Europe had been divided by wars and borders. Now it was building bridges through shared values and shared money. The dream was that one day a person could travel from Spain to Germany to France to Italy and use the same coins and notes everywhere. It was a dream of simplicity and togetherness. Once the plan was approved, the next challenge began. What would the new currency look like? In the mid-1990s, artists and designers across Europe were invited to submit their ideas for the new banknotes and coins. The final design had to represent all of Europe, not just one country or culture. After much discussion, the chosen design featured bridges, arches, and gateways, symbols of connection, cooperation, and openness. Each banknote would also have a map of Europe and the flag of the European Union, 12 golden stars in a circle on a blue background. Even the name, euro, was chosen carefully. It was short, simple, and easy to pronounce in almost every European language. To manage this new currency, Europe needed a new financial institution. So in 1998, the European Central Bank was created in Frankfurt, Germany. Its job was to control interest rates, keep prices stable, and protect the value of the euro, just like a national central bank, but for many countries at once. The ECB became one of the most powerful institutions in Europe. It ensured that all member nations followed the same rules and worked together financially. This was something the world had never seen before, multiple sovereign countries sharing one independent central bank and one currency. Finally, after years of planning, the big day came. On January 1, 1999, the euro was officially born. But at first, it wasn't the colorful paper money we know today. It existed only electronically, used by banks, businesses, and stock markets. 11 countries joined the euro at its launch: Austria, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain. These nations stopped using their old currencies for international trade. Instead, they began using the euro for all financial transactions and accounting. For ordinary citizens, life didn't change overnight. They still used their national banknotes and coins. But behind the scenes, Europe was now working with one shared currency. 3 years later, on January 1, 1992, 12 European countries officially replaced their national currencies with euro coins and banknotes. It was the largest cash changeover in history. People lined up at banks and ATMs to exchange their old money for the new one. For many, it felt emotional, saying goodbye to francs, marks, and lira that had been part of their national identity for generations. At the same time, there was excitement and pride. A French traveler could now visit Italy and use the same money. A German company could sell to Spain without worrying about exchange rates. Shops, banks, and businesses across Europe changed their systems overnight. Posters and guides were printed to help people understand the new coins and prices. It was one of the most complex but most successful financial transitions ever achieved. The introduction of the euro brought many benefits. 1. Easier trade. Businesses no longer had to worry about exchange rates between countries. This made trading faster and cheaper. 2. Stronger economy. A shared currency helped stabilize prices and encouraged investment across Europe. 3. Easier travel. Tourists could move freely between countries without exchanging money. 4. A symbol of unity. The euro made people feel more connected, as part of one European family. It was proof that cooperation could replace competition. But, like any great idea, it also came with challenges. Not everyone was happy about giving up their national currency. Some people felt they were losing part of their country's identity. Others worried that a single currency would make it harder for individual nations to control their own economies. For example, if one country faced economic trouble, it couldn't simply adjust its own currency value to help exports. All countries had to move together, even if their economies were different. Over time, these challenges would lead to debates, especially during the financial crises of the late 1990s. But in the 1990s, the focus was on hope, unity, and progress. For European leaders, the euro was more than just coins and banknotes. It was a declaration. It said, "We are no longer nations divided by wars or borders. We are Europeans, united in peace and cooperation." It became a political, cultural, and emotional statement. The euro stood as a reminder that even after centuries of conflict, countries could choose trust over fear. It was a lesson to the world that unity could be built not by force, but by shared dreams and goals. It's interesting to notice that the 1990s gave birth to two global revolutions, one digital, one financial. The internet connected people and knowledge. The euro connected economies and nations. Both were built on the same ideas: connection, trust, and unity. While the internet erased distance between people, the euro erased distance between currencies. Together they made the world more open, faster, and more cooperative than ever before. As the year 1999 came to an end, the world stood at the edge of a new millennium. The internet had already started reshaping communication and information, and the euro had begun reshaping Europe's economy and identity. The 20th century had been full of division, but the 21st was beginning with connection. The dream of a united, modern Europe and a globally connected planet was no longer fantasy, it was reality. The next chapter of history would see how these two revolutions, the internet and the euro, would shape not just Europe, but the entire world. As the clock struck midnight on January 1, 1999, fireworks lit up skies across Europe. But beyond the celebrations and music, something far more important was happening, quietly inside computers and banks. The euro had officially been born. It wasn't yet in people's wallets or pockets. You couldn't hold it, touch it, or spend it in a shop. But deep inside digital ledgers and bank records, the euro began its life. A shared currency for millions of people across Europe. The world had entered a new economic era. In the beginning, the euro existed only as virtual money. From 1999 to 2001, it was used mainly for electronic transactions, things like bank transfers between countries, business contracts, financial markets, government budgets. Every participating country still used its old banknotes and coins for daily life, but behind the scenes, all accounting was done in euros. For example, a French company selling cars to Germany would record its sales in euros. A Spanish government budget would be calculated in euros. This invisible phase gave countries time to prepare before introducing the physical money that people would use every day. At its start, 11 countries adopted the euro: Austria, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain. These countries had passed all the Maastricht criteria, proving their economies were stable enough to join. Together, they represented over 290 million people, nearly the entire population of the United States at that time. It was the largest monetary union ever created in human history. And it wasn't just a financial move, it was emotional. Europe was saying, "We trust each other. We are one." The European Central Bank, ECB, based in Frankfurt, Germany, became the heart of this new financial system. It was responsible for controlling interest rates, keeping inflation low, maintaining price stability across all member nations. Unlike national banks, the ECB didn't belong to one country. It represented all Eurozone countries equally. Its decisions affected millions of people, from farmers in Spain to teachers in Finland. This was something completely new in history, a single independent bank managing the currency of many different nations. The world watched with both admiration and curiosity. Money, in its essence, is built on trust. A piece of paper or a metal coin only has value because people believe it does. So for the euro to succeed, Europeans had to believe in it. That belief didn't come instantly. Many people loved their old currencies. The French franc, the Italian lira, the German mark, these weren't just pieces of paper. They carried memories, pride, and history. Older generations especially felt unsure. They had used their national money all their lives. The idea of replacing it with something new felt strange, even risky. But younger Europeans, students, travelers, and entrepreneurs felt excited. They saw opportunity, easier travel, simpler trade, and a shared identity that crossed borders. Step by step, confidence grew. As the new millennium approached, preparations began for the physical launch of the euro, the coins and banknotes that everyone could touch and use. Governments, banks, and stores had 3 years to get ready. It was one of the biggest logistical operations ever attempted. Each country had to print and distribute millions of new euro banknotes, meant billions of new euro coins, collect and destroy old national currencies, update cash registers, ATMs, and price tags, educate citizens on conversion rates and security features. Everything had to be done precisely, down to the smallest cent. Television ads, school lessons, and posters appeared everywhere explaining how to convert from marks, francs, or liras to euros. For example, 1 euro equals 6.55957 French francs, 1 euro equals 1.9583 German marks, and 1 euro equals 1936.27 Italian lira. Citizens began memorizing these numbers as they prepared to say goodbye to the money they'd known all their lives. When January 1, 2002 arrived, it was more than just a New Year's Day. It was the day when Europe changed its money. At midnight, 12 countries, now including Greece, officially introduced euro coins and banknotes to their citizens. People lined up outside banks, waiting to exchange their old money for the new one. For many, it was an emotional moment. In Italy, people kissed their last lira notes before handing them in. In France, families saved one last franc coin as a memory. In Germany, some people worried that the strong and stable mark, the pride of their economy, was being given away. But there was also joy. Children proudly held shiny new coins with different designs from different countries. Travelers marveled that they could now go from Paris to Rome to Madrid and spend the same money everywhere. Overnight, Europe had completed one of the greatest economic transitions in history. Each euro coin had 2 sides, one shared, one national. The shared side showed the map of Europe and 12 stars, representing unity. The national side showed symbols from each country's culture. For example, the French coin featured a tree, symbolizing life and growth. The German coin showed an eagle, a symbol of freedom. The Irish coin displayed the Celtic harp, a sign of heritage. This design was brilliant. It showed that Europe could be united, yet diverse. Different countries, one shared currency. Different cultures, one shared future. At first, people needed time to get used to the new prices. Suddenly, a coffee that used to cost 10 francs was now 1.52 euros. A train ticket that cost 20 marks was now 10.23 euros. Some thought prices had gone up, and in many cases they had slightly. Businesses sometimes rounded prices upward, leading people to complain about a euro effect. Still, most people quickly adapted. Within a few months, almost all shops, restaurants, and markets had switched to euros completely. Old money disappeared from circulation, and by the summer of 2002, it was gone for good. For the first time in history, people from different nations could buy and sell, travel, and work, all using the same money. One of the most immediate joys of the euro was travel. Europe had already opened its borders for free movement through the Schengen Agreement, which allowed people to travel between many countries without passports. Now, with the euro, travelers didn't even need to exchange money. A tourist could start in Portugal, cross into Spain, then drive through France, Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands, all without changing a single coin. This made Europe feel smaller, friendlier, and more united. It encouraged tourism, business, and a sense of shared belonging. People began calling it the Eurozone, a zone of peace, trade, and cooperation. The euro brought stability to European trade and finance. For companies, it eliminated exchange rate risks. For investors, it created a huge single market, one of the largest in the world. Countries could borrow money at lower interest rates because lenders trusted the euro's stability. Foreign investors poured money into European businesses, seeing a safe and strong currency. By 2002, the euro had quickly become one of the world's major currencies, second only to the US dollar. It was used in international trade, finance, and even held by other countries as a reserve currency. Europe had created something powerful, a symbol of trust and cooperation that stretched beyond borders. More than anything, the euro represented hope. Hope that Europe's nations could overcome old divisions. Hope that cooperation could bring prosperity. Hope that peace could last through shared goals, not rivalries. For young Europeans, it meant growing up in a continent where borders mattered less, where being European felt as real as being French, German, or Spanish. It also meant a new generation of businesses, travelers, and dreamers who saw Europe as one home. The euro became more than just currency. It became a symbol of identity. When the euro launched, the rest of the world watched closely. Economists wondered if it would work. After all, no one had ever created a currency shared by so many independent countries before. The United States observed carefully, knowing the euro could one day challenge the power of the dollar. In Asia and Latin America, some regions began discussing whether they could create their own shared currencies too. The euro inspired the world, not just as a financial tool, but as a model for cooperation in a global age. Of course, not everything was smooth. Some countries struggled to meet the strict financial rules. Others found that sharing one currency meant giving up some national control over their own economy. When times were good, the euro made things easy. But when economic crises hit, countries couldn't adjust their exchange rates to recover faster. These challenges would later become major tests, especially during the 2008 financial crisis and the debt problems that followed. But those were challenges of the future. In the early 2000s, Europe was celebrating, proud of what it had achieved. The euro and the internet grew together. As people began using the internet for online shopping, banking, and travel, the euro made things simpler. A person in Italy could buy something from a shop in France online without worrying about exchange rates. A freelancer in Germany could be paid by a company in Spain instantly in the same currency. The internet connected people digitally. The euro connected them financially. Together, they created a foundation for the modern European economy, global, digital, and borderless. The birth of the euro was one of the most extraordinary achievements of modern times. It showed that cooperation was possible on a scale the world had never seen before. It brought together nations with different languages, histories, and cultures, and united them through shared purpose. The euro proved that even after centuries of war, distrust, and separation, countries could choose peace and partnership. It was not just money, it was a message. Together, we are stronger. When future generations look back at the late 1990s and early 2000s, they will see a turning point. The internet changed how people connected and learned. The euro changed how people traded and lived. Both were built on the same foundation: trust, unity, and progress. And both set the stage for the world we live in today, a world that is more connected, more global, and more hopeful than ever before. By the early 2000s, two revolutions had changed the world forever. One was digital, the internet, connecting people through invisible webs of information. The other was economic, the euro, connecting nations through shared money and trust. Both were born in the same decade, the 1990s. Both promised a future built on connection. And both would grow together, shaping the way humanity communicates, learns, and works in the 21st century. This final chapter tells the story of how these two forces, one made of data, one made of value, transformed our world. After the year 2000, the internet grew faster than anyone could have dreamed. New technologies made it quicker, smarter, and easier to use. Dial-up modems were replaced by broadband connections, which allowed websites to load instantly and videos to play smoothly. Suddenly, people didn't have to go online. They were always online. The internet stopped being a tool and became a part of daily life. It was in homes, schools, offices, airports, and eventually in our pockets. In 2007, the world saw something new: the iPhone. It wasn't the first mobile phone, but it was the first to combine calling, internet browsing, email, camera, and apps, all in one sleek device. For the first time, people could carry the internet wherever they went. They could check news, send photos, and shop online, all from a small screen. Within a few years, millions of people owned smartphones. The internet became truly global, reaching even remote villages through mobile networks. It changed everything: communication, education, business, and even how people spent their free time. The internet was no longer something you visited. It was something you lived inside. As more people came online, new platforms appeared, places where people could share their lives, thoughts, and experiences. Facebook, 2004, YouTube, 2005, Twitter, 2006, and Instagram, 2010, became digital meeting places for billions of people. Suddenly, anyone could publish photos, stories, or videos for the whole world to see. A young student in Poland could post a video watched by people in Japan or Brazil. A small artist in Spain could sell paintings to someone in Canada. The internet gave ordinary people a voice, something once reserved for newspapers, radio, or TV. This was the rise of social media, where the world became not just connected, but interactive. Before the internet, knowledge lived in books, schools, and libraries. Now, it lived everywhere. Search engines like Google made finding information as easy as typing a few words. Wikipedia turned into a living encyclopedia, written and updated by people all over the world. Students no longer had to wait for libraries to open. They could research, learn, and watch lessons from teachers across continents. Doctors shared discoveries instantly. Scientists collaborated in real time. Farmers learned new methods from videos online. The internet became the largest, most open classroom in human history, a true library of humanity. But like any library, it also required wisdom. Not every page told the truth. Learning how to find reliable information became one of the most important skills of the new age. As the internet connected people, it also connected work. In the past, jobs depended on where you lived. Now, you could work with anyone, anywhere. A designer in Italy could create a logo for a company in Finland. A teacher in Greece could give online lessons to students in France. A programmer in Portugal could build software for a client in the United States. Freelancing and remote work became part of everyday life. The internet had erased borders from the job market. New platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, and LinkedIn allowed professionals to find work without needing an office or even a physical meeting. The workplace had gone global. E-commerce, which began with small websites like Amazon and eBay, became a new way of life. People grew used to buying everything online: books, clothes, food, even furniture. Online payments became faster and safer. Companies like PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard built digital systems that worked seamlessly and across borders. For Europe, the euro made this even easier. With one shared currency, customers from different countries could buy and sell without conversion fees or confusion. The internet connected buyers and sellers. The euro made it smooth and simple. Together, they created a borderless marketplace, one of the greatest achievements of modern civilization. Before the euro and the internet, banking meant standing in lines, filling out paper forms, and waiting for approvals. Now people could open apps on their phones, send money instantly, and see balances update in real time. The combination of the euro and online banking made transactions effortless. Whether you were in Paris or Lisbon, transferring euros was instant and cost almost nothing. New digital banks like N26, Revolut, and Wise appeared in the 2010s. They had no physical branches, yet served millions of people across Europe. Banking had become borderless, just like the internet itself. It was a perfect example of how technology and trust could work together to simplify life. The euro's early years were full of hope, but also tests. In 2008, a global financial crisis hit the world. Banks collapsed, stock markets fell, and many economies struggled. Europe was not spared. Countries like Greece, Portugal, Ireland, and Spain faced deep debt problems. Critics said the euro made it harder for countries to recover because they couldn't adjust their own currencies. Supporters argued that without the euro, things could have been even worse. Through long nights of meetings and negotiations, European leaders found ways to protect the eurozone. Bailout packages, financial reforms, and the guidance of the European Central Bank helped restore stability. It wasn't easy, but the euro survived, and its survival proved that Europe's unity was stronger than its crises. In the years that followed, more countries joined the eurozone. What began with 11 nations grew steadily. Greece joined in 2001, Slovenia in 2007, Cyprus and Malta in 2008, Slovakia in 2009, Estonia in 2011, Latvia in 2014, Lithuania in 2015. By the mid-2010s, 19 countries shared the euro. For millions of Europeans, it became not just a currency, but a symbol of stability, even during uncertain times. As technology advanced, Europe began thinking about the next step, a digital euro. Just as emails replaced letters and streaming replaced CDs, money was becoming digital too. The idea was to create an official electronic version of the euro, safe, easy to use, and backed by the European Central Bank. It would allow people to make payments instantly, even without banks in between. This new form of currency, still being developed today, shows how the spirit of innovation that began in the 1990s continues to evolve. The euro, like the internet, is always adapting, always growing with time. The internet and the euro didn't just change Europe, they change how the world thinks about connection. The internet made global communication possible. The euro showed that cooperation among nations could work. Together, they inspired others. In Africa, countries began discussing digital currencies in regional trade zones. In Asia, nations strengthened online trade and created new free trade agreements. In Latin America, economic unions formed to share resources and simplify commerce. The world was learning from Europe's experiment, learning that unity brings strength. Of course, progress also brought new challenges. The internet created issues of privacy, cybersecurity, and misinformation. The euro demanded careful financial discipline and coordination. Both required responsibility as much as innovation. Europe learned that technology and economics are not just systems, they are part of human life. And human life needs balance between freedom and safety, speed and wisdom, innovation and care. Children born after 2000 have grown up in a world where both the internet and the euro have always existed. They can't imagine a world without Google, YouTube, or WhatsApp. They can't imagine needing to exchange money when traveling between France and Italy. For them, the world feels smaller, more connected, and full of opportunity. A student in Germany can study online at a university in Spain. A startup in Finland can sell products across Europe in euros. A musician in Portugal can reach fans worldwide through social media. This generation doesn't just use the internet and the euro, they live through them. They are the first truly global citizens. The rise of the internet and the euro taught the world something powerful. When people share information, money, or ideas, they grow stronger. Connection builds understanding. Understanding builds cooperation. And cooperation builds peace. The internet taught us to share knowledge. The euro taught us to share trust. Together, they showed humanity what it meant to live in an interconnected world, one where borders matter less than our shared dreams. As the world continues to grow and change, both the internet and the euro continue to evolve. The internet is moving into new realms: artificial intelligence, virtual reality, blockchain, and the Internet of Things, where machines talk to each other. The euro is exploring digital versions, sustainable finance, and ways to support greener, fairer economies. Both remind us that progress never stops. But both also remind us that progress must have purpose. Technology and money are tools. Their true value lies in how they help people live better lives. When historians look back at the end of the 20th century, they will see two milestones standing side by side: the invention of the internet and the creation of the euro. Both transformed human life, one through communication, the other through cooperation. Both began with bold dreams and became everyday realities. They turned the 1990s into a turning point for civilization, the decade that connected humanity. And even now, every message sent online, every payment made in euros, every video watched, every idea shared, all carry the spirit of that connection forward. The internet taught us that no distance is too far for a message to travel. The euro taught us that no difference is too great for people to work together. Both remind us that when humanity chooses connection over division, it creates miracles, not just of technology or economy, but of unity and hope. And so as the world continues to grow and change, one truth remains: the more we connect, the more we understand. The more we understand, the more we can build together. The internet and the euro were not just inventions, they were the bridges of a new world. Bridges built not of steel or stone, but of trust, knowledge, and shared humanity.